Good evening, and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Kimon, and I'm a business attorney and partner at Millcrest Law in Radnor, Pennsylvania. I focus my practice in the areas of life sciences, healthcare, and technology. Tonight we're continuing our special series on life sciences, healthcare, and technology leaders in the Delaware Valley. Before I get started, I want to remind our viewers that from time to time, financial issues relating to life sciences, healthcare, and technology matters or companies may be discussed on the show. These discussions are not and should not be viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since the show is pre-recorded and shown at a later time, the information may no longer be current. We advise you to always speak with your financial advisor before entering into any financial transaction. I'm happy to have with me as my co-host this evening, Charlie Huntington. Charlie is the Chair of Public Relations for Pennsylvania Bio. Pennsylvania Bio is the voice of advancement for biosciences in Pennsylvania. Charlie, thanks for co-hosting.
Thanks, Kimon.
So Pennsylvania Bio just had their fall industry meeting. I was wondering if you could share with our viewers a recap of the meeting and maybe some highlights.
Great, yes, thanks. It's called Life Sciences Future. That's been the name of it for the past two times we've had it in the fall. I want to get my statistics right. So there were 650 attendees from 6 states. There were 42 scientific short talks from 21 different participating research institutions. Dr. Margaret Hamburg, who's the commissioner of the FDA, was a keynote speaker. In addition, Senator Bob Casey spoke from Pennsylvania. There was major network coverage of the event, and in the afternoon, we had a representative, a PhD from Children's Hospital, discussing potential Ebola outbreak there and what they would do.
Wow.
So yeah, I would say it was a home run. Would encourage all of our viewers next year to consider attending.
Okay, that's great. Well, we have a terrific show tonight and actually a lot of territory to cover, so it probably behooves us to get right into the meat of our show. Before I do, I want to remind our viewers that if you have a question that you would like us to answer on a future show, here's how you do it.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Well, it's now my great pleasure to introduce our special guest this evening, Dr. Alessandro Fatatis. Dr. Fatatis is currently a professor of pharmacology, physiology, and pathology at the Drexel University College of Medicine. He's also the co-leader of the program in prostate cancer at the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center of Thomas Jefferson University. In addition, Dr. Fatatis is the co-founder, along with Dr. Joseph Salvino, of Kerberos Biopharmaceuticals, Inc. Kerberos is an early-stage drug discovery and development company that aims to develop drugs for the treatment of patients with advanced breast and prostate cancer. Its primary focus is on halting metastasis in advanced cancers. Dr. Fatatis spent 4 separate periods at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland as a visiting scientist before moving to the United States in 1994. Prior to joining Drexel, he was a member of the faculty at the University of Chicago. Dr. Fatatis received his medical degree from the University Federico II in Naples, Italy, and his PhD in experimental oncology from the University of Chieti, Italy. Sandro, welcome to the show.
Kimon and Charlie, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
All right, our great pleasure. Can you tell us what first attracted you to a career in healthcare and, I guess, more specifically, life sciences?
Well, I decided to go to medical school when I was in my high school years, and during the time in medical school, I learned that it was quite important to reach the patient and to cure the patient in the best way possible. And I think the PhD was consequential. So at the end of the medical school, I earned a PhD in experimental oncology, and then at that point I was in. I decided that I would, rather than be a full-time physician, I would also pursue research, particularly in the field of oncology and experimental oncology.
What is experimental oncology?
Well, you can say that if cancer biology and tumor biology are more on a basic side of research, experimental oncology tends to pursue the translation of discovery in the clinic. So oncology is typically a medical discipline, but experimental oncology tends to be in the translational space, which is the space that is placed between basic science and basic discovery and the clinic.
Now, I mentioned during my introduction of you that you had spent 4 separate times where you visited the NIH and Bethesda. What is it that you were doing while you were visiting?
Well, at the time I was definitely younger, and I decided to focus more on the basic aspect of research. I understood that if I wanted to move into the translational space and then move with animal model of disease, for example, I had to learn first the cellular and molecular determinants of disease. And so at the NIH I was working more on the basic side of research, with some hint into neuroscience, believe it or not. But my interest was to dissect and to understand signaling pathways and the way cells would respond to growth factors. All the things I've learned at that time have been incredibly beneficial to then move into the more translational space where I am now.
Mm-hmm. And what ultimately led you to move from Italy to the U.S.?
That was not an easy decision. I moved with my wife. She's a neuroscientist and a neuropharmacologist. We had 1-year-old boy at the time, so it wasn't easy with no relatives around, and we both had to work. But the main motivation was that, at least at that time, 2 decades ago, academia in Europe and in Italy in particular was moving at a different rhythm, and I had to, if I wanted to stay there, I had to follow some guidelines and rules I wasn't ready to accept. I wanted to move at a faster speed, and I wanted to be more independent and decide what sort of research I would do. And I think that the fact that I've been at the NIH before just showed me that that was possible, could be done. I had to move overseas, and I did just that.
Can you tell our viewers a little bit about your roles both at Drexel and at Thomas Jefferson?
Sure. So at Drexel, I'm a professor in an academic department. I run a research lab. I have some teaching responsibilities, all the service that comes with the role of being a senior faculty of the department, but is mostly research. At the Kimon Cancer Center, and should actually say Sydney Kimon Cancer Center now, I'm a co-leader of one of the 5 programs of the Cancer Center, and that is focused on prostate cancer. So we need to coordinate all the research activity, the interaction with clinicians. We need to identify projects that might be ready to lead into clinical trials, and in general it is an exhilarating experience. My co-leader and the leader of the program are, the leader is Karen Knudsen, is one of the best scientists in prostate cancer in this country. The co-leader with me, Dr. Lenny Gomella, one of the best urologists in the country. In fact, to me, he's the best, but I have a little bias there. But you know, the group is fantastic, and it's a great experience every day.
How did you meet Dr. Salvino, and what led the two of you to start Kerberos?
That was in 2010, and we were having, and this goes to the merit, and is not the only one, to the chairman of our department. He organized a meeting with all the faculty members and at the time adjunct members. Joe was an adjunct member of the department, and Dr. Jim Barrett, who was the chairman of the department, realized that there was much communication between the adjunct members of the faculty and the effective members of the faculty. And so he organized this meeting, and we all described our research and our scientific goals. And at the end of the meeting, when we were supposed to socialize, we did just that. And Joe approached me and he said, I have 20 plus years of experience in the industry. I'm an expert in medicinal chemistry for the sort of the receptor, the molecule I was working on at the time, one of those that was working at the time. And he said, can I do something for you? And I say, well, actually you can. I need to block this receptor, and I have no way to do so. And he told me, give me 2 weeks. He actually came back 10 days later with a little vial. Well, because he had experience before, so he wasn't really starting from scratch. And we still remember that first molecule. It wasn't that great, but he said, give me 2 more weeks. And at the end, after a few iterations, I thought it would take much longer. We started having a molecule we could work on, and that was great.
Wow.
And again, I need to say that as an academic scientist, the ability to have someone that comes back with a new tool for you to work rather than you fishing it out from a catalog, it's just invaluable. So that was the beginning of a great friendship and partnership, and that's how Kerberos was born, from the idea and the tools to pursue that idea.
How would you say your experience and career up to that point helped prepare you to start your own biopharmaceutical company?
Only partially, I would say, because I was ready to talk to people about the science, the reasons why I was pursuing those specific objectives. I don't fear to talk to people and have an audience. Actually, I really like it, but it is difficult to adapt to an audience which is not just meant or made by scientists, your peers, but it's made of financial advisors, business consultants, and investors. You know, just to give you one little example, as a scientist, you always want to be the first discovering a new molecule, a new target, revealing a new pathway. If you try to do the same when you are talking to investors, and you have to, because if you start a small company, that's the absolutely necessary step to be able to continue what you started. You need to make sure that they can validate your claims, something that other scientists don't do. They don't give you the benefit of doubt, but they can immediately see whether or not what you're claiming has some truth behind it. Investors might be more difficult to talk to for a scientist. So I had to learn how to talk to them, but I like new things. So that it took some time, but I think now I'm doing a much better job than before.
I'm sure you are.
Can you tell our viewers a little about Kerberos Biopharmaceuticals, please?
Sure. So we are developing drugs that target a specific receptors that cancer cells use to attach to the blood vessels in different organs, and from there invade the surrounding tissue and seed metastasis. And this can be done because I identified the target in 2004 expressed by both prostate cancer cells and breast cancer cells, but also because we can block that interaction with the molecules that Joe had developed. And so now we can test this idea in animal models, and we are succeeding in showing that we can indeed block these cells from seeding new lesions. This is a completely different approach from any other drug company or any other strategy that is used in experimental oncology, where, well, basically in different flavors, the main goal is that of killing cancer cells. You have cancer cells in the tissue disseminated throughout the body. You try to reach them and kill them. Our strategy is different. We are trying to prevent them from seeding new metastases so that the patient might be stopped in what is called an oligometastatic state, few lesions, asymptomatic, for the longest time possible.
Are you all developing any proprietary intellectual property, or have you developed any proprietary?
We have a patent that published about a year and a half ago.
Can you tell us about it, please?
Yes. Well, the patent basically involves the drugs and the series that have been developed to block this target and all the possible uses for it in terms of anti-metastatic capabilities. In order to do that, we had an enormous support from Drexel because they were able not only to help us along the way, although Joe had previous experience with that, but they provide us with the financial support, with strategic support, and all the legal consultation that was necessary for that. Drexel is absolutely invaluable in this regard.
So in what stage is the intellectual property now?
We have a patent published, and that has helped us to interact with investors. You know, there was a debate whether or not we had to hold on a little bit and wait that the clock would start ticking too soon. And on the other hand, we wanted to protect our intellectual property to make sure that whoever wanted to invest in the company would know that there was that sort of protection. So there was a little bit of debate. I think that we could have waited a little bit longer, but ultimately I think we did the right choice. So now we have a patent and it's published.
Excellent. And what was the need that you identified in the marketplace that led you to your work at Kerberos?
Right. The need was essentially try to block the progression of metastatic disease. Many patients, when they are discovered with a few metastatic lesions, they are completely asymptomatic. This is true for prostate or breast cancer patients. They are completely asymptomatic. Their social life, professional life is absolutely unchanged. The news are broken on them from most of the time it's a bone scan, which is used to monitor patients after the primary tumor is being successfully eradicated. And at that point, the patient knows that while asymptomatic, something will happen and might happen, and they need to, and the physicians and the team that will take care of the patient will have to block those few lesions to amplify, multiply. And so I think the need was to also extend the time that the standard of care can eradicate the disease without having more and more lesions emerging at subsequent scans. Most of the times medical oncologists chase the disease. They cure some lesions disappear, and there are new ones that appear. And every time you give a chance to cancer cells to multiply and divide, they might accumulate mutations. They might make them resistant to the drug. They work on the first lesions and don't work now anymore. And so we identified that need. And I think the timing was right, because after the discovery of the fact that cancer cells might be present in circulation in patients that don't have the primary tumor anymore, it was clear that those were cells that were released by some lesions, were circulating, and there were potential seeds for additional lesions. No one was working on that space. Everybody was pursuing the cytotoxic effect, killing cancer cells. That was the only thing that mattered. We are trying just to block them from seeding and give more time to the drugs to work properly on those that have been detected.
That's what your competition has been doing.
So let me just go back a little bit to the standard of care or the protocols for the treatment of people with advanced, stage breast cancer or prostate cancer. What is that standard of care now? And if you're successful at Kerberos in developing a drug or whatever out of your research, how would you fit into that standard of care? Right.
So prostate cancer and breast cancer have some similarities, but there are of course many differences as well. I think the similarities that all prostate cancers and a percentage of breast cancers are dependent on hormones. And so one of the standard of care tends to reduce the amount of hormones available for cancer cells, so that those hormones cannot fuel cancer cells and allow them to grow. So that's one thing that is done quite consistently for prostate cancer patients and breast cancer patients. The hormone deprivation therapy is one first line of therapy. And then for those breast cancer patients that do not express the receptors for hormones, then in that case there are targeted therapies or chemotherapy. But again, depending on regardless of the flavor, the goal is always the same: killing the cancer cells. And the problem that everybody understands exists is that once the tumor becomes of certain size, it's very difficult to deliver effectively the concentration of drugs that we need to kill the cancer cells in the center of the tumor. So you might kill quite effectively the cells on the periphery of the nodule, but not in the center of it. And this is clearly hampering most of these approaches. These therapies work beautifully. But if you don't eradicate all the cells eventually will mutate and become resistant. And I think this is the biggest obstacle we are facing now.
And so, I'm sorry, so did you say how would you fit into that?
Right, so our approach would fit in this by not only allowing the patients to stay on oligometastatic state with few lesions, not asymptomatic for longer time, but will also help the drug that we have now to work more on the existing lesions without having to chase the disease, as I mentioned before.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that.
One of the biggest questions that we seem to ask and get a variety of answers to is, how do you fund your operations? Most of science needs to make it through clinical trials, it seems, these days.
Exactly.
How are you responding to that challenge?
There are different ways you can do that. There is some so-called undiluted funding where government agencies will provide you the financial support to pursue your research. So the NIH and the Department of Defense, applying to these agencies is just routine for every scientist. Even if the goal is not going to clinical trials, if you want to sustain your research, you have to apply to these funding sources. Currently, the situation is kind of dreadful. The pay line is very, very low, but that's one way to do it. There are some formulas or some types of award that the NIH has for small companies such as the SBIR, which is something which is specifically crafted if you have drugs that you want to bring to the clinical trials. In addition to this, clearly talking to private investors, angels, and we have been doing quite a bit of that. And even if no, it takes time. I think that every time you do it, you do it better than the time before, and you learn a lot from what the needs are. You can't really ask private investors to give you money based on an idea. They need guarantees. They need to know that this idea will become to fruition. And so while they might appreciate the idea from a scientific standpoint, they need to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you need to be good enough to show that to them. And if you do and you succeed, then that might become also the major source of funding. But you know, so far we have been successful in federal funding from the NIH.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. What would you say the biggest barriers are to entry into your industry?
Finding the right people to talk to. I think that there are initiatives available that should be advertised as much as possible, because you need to find people you can describe the idea and they have enough time to listen to you. We all learn how important it is to pitch your idea, but the truth is, in 30 seconds or 1 minute or 3 minutes, you can probably catch the attention of the person you're talking to, but that's not going to be enough to convince that person to make the further step, which is funding your research. You need to find the right premises and opportunities. And word of mouth work beautifully too. People might not be ready to listen to you in a factual way because they are not ready to fund you, but might know people that are at least willing to listen. And so I think that this is the big obstacle. The biggest obstacle is not anything else than just being able to advertise about your idea. And of course, your science needs to be good.
What would you say would be a successful outcome for Kerberos? For
Kerberos. Being able to complete phase 1 clinical trials with no toxicity of the lowest level possible of toxicity and be ready to go in phase 2. We are aware of the fact that we are so small that it's going to be unrealistic to bring what we have past initial phase 2. So at one point we need to...
It'd be an acquisition candidate.
There will be an acquisition. Yeah. But I think that the success is essentially being able to show first as a scientist, from an intellectual standpoint, showing that you are right is what really makes you to work in this field. But the most important thing is to be able to contribute with drugs that can be used in combination with standard of care to implement the work of standard of care. So I would say phase 2, after a successful phase 1, would be a great success for us.
If I may just ask a follow-up question. How would your approach be different if you had stayed in Italy and had this over there? Would you be able to do what you've done here in Italy?
Would have been very difficult. Okay. I think the culture is changing, and again, what I say before refers to 20 years ago. Right. That's when I left. Right. So now I know that things are changing. I recently was asked for a meeting with the Italian consul, and we discussed how our model can be transferred to the people that we know in Italy, and how this can be implemented also for scientists that Italy might have, and I'm sure there is scores of scientists with brilliant ideas that do not have the ability to be so immediate, so straightforward in proposing their ideas to investors. So it would have been difficult.
Remembering that our show is geared towards financial people and not science people,
right.
If you were to attempt this in Italy and you were to go before their version of the FDA, right. Is it done country by country? Is it done as the entire European Economic Union?
It is done definitely in Italy. There is the Ministero della Sanità, so the Italian Ministry for Health, that will evaluate your application. It will work exactly as for the FDA.
Okay.
So it will not
country
be
by country.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sandro, can you tell us a little bit about the environment that Drexel University has created that allows researchers to, I guess, take their research and develop businesses from that research?
Absolutely. I think that Joe and I have been absolutely lucky to be at Drexel, because the mentality and the philosophy and the culture at Drexel is try to implement as much as possible that the discovery is translated to the real world, to the clinical space in biomedical terms for what concerns us. But this is true not only for biomedical scientists, but engineering and bioengineering. They all strive to take discovery to the real world. The atmosphere has been, from the beginning, absolutely outstanding. Again, starting from the chairman of our department, Dr. James Barrett, he went from academia to industry, came back to academia, and is a source of invaluable information. He supported us financially, strategically, has been absolutely fantastic in this. We wouldn't be talking about Kerberos if it wasn't for Jim. And another example is the Dr. Robert McGrath. He's the Associate Vice Dean for technology commercialization. When I thought that I had something that might have some legs, I called him. He came to the office. He has a PhD in biomedical sciences, so he grasped the idea in 3 minutes, and he says, "Sandro, we need to pursue this." I never had the feeling that I was going to step onto a minefield, being an academic scientist, trying to move into the, if you pass me the term, in the corporate world and the private sector and so forth. Many institutions will not necessarily be very happy and encouraging on that regard, and Drexel has been absolutely invaluable. Now there is the Clinical and Translational Research Institute, which is led by Dr. Barrett, and the Deputy Director is Dr. Meucci. She's my wife, and she's a member of the faculty. She's the neuroscientist I told you before that left with me to come to the US. So the culture is growing, and there has been pilot grants for other ideas for junior faculty that had brilliant discoveries, and they want to bring it to the private sector and to the application in clinical terms. I think that this has been perfect timing, and Drexel has been absolutely invaluable. It would have been incredibly difficult, if possible at all, if Drexel wasn't the university that it is. Wow.
We've had some guests on the show from all of the universities around Philadelphia, and it seems to me that all of them are starting to really, get it in terms of that kind of support for researchers. So it's great to hear. It's great to hear that that's been your experience. Right. Well, believe it or not, we're at the end of our show, so it always goes fast, and we could probably do another show on the things that you have to talk about. But at any rate, I'd like to thank our special guest this evening, Dr. Alessandro Fatatis. Charlie, also thank you for co-hosting this evening. The next guest on Money Matters is Tom Giacopinello. He's the CEO of Baby Life Seat, Inc. Also, I'd like to remind our viewers that Money Matters is now available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, listed as Money Matters, the podcast, for mobile devices. The video is also available on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, as well as on our website. Thanks for watching this evening, and we'll see you again next time.